All right, welcome back to another episode. Today we are going to take a closer look at Unity Software. The company today announced an open letter to their community. So, for those that have not been following this Unity drama, about a week ago, Unity introduced a new fee structure and it did kind of get a lot of backlash. So Unity is kind of, I want to say they're not fully turning around the fees, but the fees I want to say are way better. I think this is going to be the best case for both stock investors and obviously the best case for game developers. For those that are not familiar, my name's Jose Najarro. This channel is mainly focused on stock market investing, so I'm going to give it more of a business perspective view. Obviously, there are going to be some game developers, because this is such a popular topic, viewing this channel, and obviously my view might be a bit different from a game developers because I'm looking at it from another point of view. So definitely make sure to let me know your comments. What are your thoughts and what are you guys seeing with these new changes that the company announced? So for those that are not familiar, like I mentioned, about a week ago, Unity did kind of introduce a new fee structure, and they got numerous backlashes from small to big time game developers. So Unity kind of returned, and I just want to showcase and kind of remind investors why they got the backlash. So I believe there was three main reasons for the backlash that Unity reserved or received. The first is this was a fee that kind of came out of nowhere. So game developers were saying, hey, look, if Unity is able to come out with this fee out of nowhere, how do we know a year from now, 2 years from now, they're not going to do the same thing over and over and over again? So it's kind of breaking that trust. So I want to say is that kind of fee just appearing out of nowhere. The second thing I want to say was a big backlash was that this kind of fee was even working, was going to be implemented even on previous generations of Unity software. Usually when a new fee structure or new changes are happening in forms of a software market or anywhere in general, usually that fee structure starts in the new generation of the platform. So every year, let's say for example, Unity releases a new platform. If the new game developer wants to use the new kind of engine or the new platform, then they're going to be titled to the new fee structure. But that's not how Unity worked. That they say, hey, even old games, even games that are in previous generations are also going to be implemented in that fee structure. And this is something that they're changing, and I really liked it. I want to say the third thing about this fee, it was an installment fee, and it's very hard to track for the game developer. So it's pretty much Unity just saying, hey, look, trust me, we're going to figure out the best way to do it. You're not going to know the back end of how we're tracking it. You're just going to have to trust us, and you're going to have this fee. And I want to say maybe there was a fourth thing, and the fourth thing is that there was actually no contract to some extent, so Unity would be able to kind of change those fees later on in the future. And the biggest thing is a lot of trust was broken. So I think those were the four major backlashes that obviously a lot of game developers had. If I missed any, let me know on the comments below, but I do believe those are probably four of the top backlashes that Unity game developers obviously would kind of hate.
Finally, I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
I want to say at the end of the day, everybody hates to be working on a platform and have new fees implemented. But as software continues to evolve, as companies continue to invest in bettering the solutions that they are providing, I do believe it's a fair assessment that for future products, is okay for a company to increase or introduce fee structures. Maybe it is not okay to introduce it to previous generations, but to new generations and further products, I do believe it is a-okay for a company to implement a new fee structure. So let's take a closer look at this open letter. And the open letter is written by Mark Whitten. And it's funny, I was reading a lot of comment posts on Twitter or X, and one of the persons, I did read a comment that mentions that, hey, Mark Whitten is probably one of the most liked persons in Unity. So opposed to having the CEO who gets a lot of backlash and a lot of hate, they kind of put someone else as the spokesperson for this kind of open letter. So Mark Whitman says that he leads leads the Unity Create, which includes the Unity engine and editor teams. And he wants to just start off by saying, hey, they are sorry. Obviously, they are sorry, but they are sorry about all the backlash that they are getting. They should have spoken with more of you. And I kind of did a video on this earlier before. I do believe that Unity talked to at least their big game developers, the ones that are making the big money here on their platforms, because they believe that those were the people that were really going to create the backlash, not maybe your small to medium-sized game developing communities. So I guess to their beliefs, they were probably focused on the big whales, and they talked to the big whales, but they didn't really talk to anybody else before announcing their new runtime fee policy. So they're kind of changing their platform, right? They mentioned that their Unity personal plan will remain free, and there will be no runtime fee for games built on Unity personal. And that obviously makes sense. What I do believe a lot of Unity personal users will enjoy is that they will be increasing the cap from $100,000 to $200,000 and will remove the requirement to use the Made with Unity splash screen. That is a big change, especially if you are kind of a solo or a very small indie game development company. Now, kind of having that gap increase means that you no longer have to pay if your game is making over $100,000. Now that limit is going to be $200,000. So I think this change here is kind of a way to say, hey, I'm sorry to a lot of the small game developers. And I do want to say probably a lot of the small game developers were the ones that were making a lot of noise. The second thing they mentioned, no games with less than 1 million in trailing 12 months revenue will be subject to the fee. And I do believe this is very important because another big pain here was that there's a lot of free to play games, right? So it would kind of destroy the incentives for game developers to create free-to-play games in Unity if they were going to get some form of charge per installment, even though their game was free to play. So this is, I want to say, eliminating that fear and kind of, hey, if you're creating a free-to-play game, games with less than $1 million in trailing 12 months will not be subject to the fee. So I think that's another good thing. And I want to say this, what I'm going to talk about in this open letter, as I'm looking at it, I do believe is the best case scenario for game developers and the best case scenario for shareholders. Obviously, the trust by some game developers might be broken and they might be leaving the platform, but I do believe this is enough to kind of heal some of that bridge. And it's not the best. I want to say, obviously, at the end of the day, game developers would have loved for them to be no fee at all, and kind of shareholders would have loved the fee to really stay as it was before. But I do believe this is the perfect ground for both investors and for game developers. They do mention that the runtime fee policy will only apply beginning with the next version of Unity shipping in 2024 and beyond. So this is pretty good, right? Because one of the biggest changes that I mentioned earlier on was that a lot of game developers were like, hey, look, we were using a previous version. This previous version didn't have any of the fees when we started working on it. So why should we kind of be included in this runtime fee? So Unity is saying, hey, okay, that's not an issue. If you're kind of using previous versions, we're not going to kind of include any fees in that. We're only going to include it with the next generation going here. Obviously, I do want to say this is going to probably force Unity to maybe slow down some of maybe the tools that they were going to release on the current version because they might be saving those versions for the next generation, and it will kind of create an incentive for game developers to kind of move into that new version. They also mentioned your games that are currently shipped and the projects you are currently working on will not be included unless you choose to upgrade them to this new version of Unity. So again, a lot of game development could take years, right? Months, years. And one of the issues is like, hey, look, I've been working on my game for a year or for 6 months. For 3 months, it makes no sense for me to kind of change out of this platform. I'm just gonna have to suck it and take the fees. But now Unity is saying, hey, look, As long as you don't upgrade to the new version of Unity, you won't be impacted. So I do believe that's another great change. They also say that they will make sure that you can stay on terms applicable for the version of Unity editor you are using. So what I believe is going to happen here is Unity is going to give you a new term of agreement, a term of service, and then there's going to be more of a contract. So a lot of people were saying, hey, look, what if Unity in the future kind of changes these fees for our current generation or our current version of the software? I do believe by them saying this is like, hey, look, we're going to kind of create maybe some short contract where you don't have to worry anymore of, hey, in the future, we won't be able to make any changes to the current version that you have. So now the final thing, they kind of talked about what's going to happen for the games that are subject to this runtime fee. So they're going to give a choice, either a 2.5% revenue share or the calculated amount based on the number of new people engaging with your game each month. So that's going to be the installment base. So both numbers they say are self-reported from the data you already have available, and they mentioned that you will always be billed the lesser amount. So the fee is staying here, right? To some extent, it is staying here. It might be a lower fee now because it's going to be which one is lower, either a 2.5% revenue share, which is a lot better than the competitor. The competitor is Unreal Engine to some extent, and I do believe their revenue share is 5%, right? Where here Unity is saying is 2.5%, or the kind of calculation of the fee, whichever is lower. And I do believe here they're going to give you more of self-reported numbers. So these are information and data that the game developer has. So it's no longer as Unity saying, hey, look, trust us, we're going to give you the right number. So at the end of the day, Unity is going to end up getting more money with this revenue share or with this fee. At the same time, to some extent, game developers kind of got what they heard. I do believe to some extent you can't expect the platform to be free or not increase fees. But again, I do believe that Unity should not have done those fees out of the whim and should be kind of included in future deployments of future engines. And that's what Unity is really doing. So I think this is a big change. I don't think it was a complete 180. I don't think they're completely backtracking. They're continuing with their fees. But now I do believe this is a better and more open community, open area for both the game developers and Unity as a platform, and obviously a good news for stock investors as well. I do believe if Unity would have introduced the platform like this, they would have not gotten the backlash that they got. Obviously, at the end of the day, people are always going to complain about fees, but I do believe maybe the big players and the ones that's really started to make noise, maybe those medium-sized studios that do have some successful games in this platform, wouldn't have really made that much noise and they would have been okay with it. So I think Unity just needs to do better with communicating with their customers. At the end of the day, this kind of makes me a little bit more bullish on Unity software. I do enjoy Unity stock at these price points of the low 30s. Like I mentioned, a bulk of my buying was last year in October when the stock hit low 20s, where it was like in the 21s, 22s, 23s, and that's where I really built up my position. At the 30s, this is a company sitting at a price to sales ratio of below 6 for forward price to sales ratio. So again, Unity, it gets a lot of hate. Some people hate their management. I'm personally okay with management, so I definitely do enjoy the investments. I do believe they have a really strong engine. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, but it's definitely one of those stocks that has huge growth opportunities, but does have a huge amount of risk behind it. So take care, have a good day, and see you next time.